Hey everyone, what's up? Halloween is almost here, and I think it's the perfect time to talk about Resident Evil. The Resident Evil games are some of my favorite games of all time. When it comes to video games, there are only a certain amount of series that I'm interested in, and the Resident Evil series is one of them. But I am a fan of the older games. When Resident Evil stopped being survival horror and they went in a new direction, I lost interest. So, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about me liking certain Resident Evil games, specifically the older ones. There are spoilers in this video. You've been warned. Let's get started. Now, my favorite Resident Evil games are Resident Evil 1 Director's Cut and the Remake, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Resident Evil Code Veronica X. The first game I'm going to talk about is Resident Evil 1 Director's Cut. The first Resident Evil game I played was Resident Evil Director's Cut, and that game is one of my favorite games of all time. I did a video back in 2014 about my experiences with it as a kid. I'll leave a link, but I first played it when I was either 9 or 10, and that game scared the fuck out of me. Just think about it. You're stuck in a mansion. There's zombies, hunters, crazy dogs, a gigantic snake, and the fucking tyrant. The tyrant. This huge creature. And you see its heart beating from the outside. And it has this crazy claw or whatever it is. All in this mansion. Now picture yourself. You're a part of STARS. You have to investigate this area. And things go to hell. You start getting chased by crazy dogs, and you run to this mansion where you think you're safe, but you're not. And you have to deal with all of this in this mansion because if you try to go outside, dogs will rip you apart. So you have to stay and confront whatever the fuck is going on. Resident Evil made players feel isolated, creeped out, and most importantly, scared. Not everyone felt that way, but I know when I was a kid, Resident Evil Director's Cut scared the fuck out of me. Looking back on Resident Evil Director's Cut, I have so many memories. I remember the first time I saw one of the STARS members picked apart by crows, or the first time I saw that zombie, the first zombie you see in the game. For those of you that have played Resident Evil, you know what I'm talking about. Remember that cutscene where you go into the room? And then you see this zombie eating someone, and he turns around with blood all over his mouth, and he gives you a death stare. That scared the shit out of me when I was a kid, and I definitely remember seeing the tyrant, seeing this big ass anaconda, and I love the little things too. It's not just seeing the bosses or mini bosses in the game, or seeing the cutscenes, it's also the little things that they added in the game. For example, when you read this guy's diary and you go through it, you're finding out the story of him slowly turning into a zombie. In the beginning, he writes paragraphs, he's articulate, but as you read further into the diary, it gets less articulate. He's not writing paragraphs, he's just writing words. It's very simple. Then all you see at the end is, must eat flesh, or something like that. I forgot what the exact words were. And when you're done reading the diary, he jumps out and tries to eat you. Moments like that make the game great. I also like how the developers made you feel alone when you're playing this game, especially if you're playing as Chris. Poor Chris. I know Rebecca helped him, but still, he was pretty much on his own. If you play as Jill, at least you have Barry. Now, I can talk about the first Resident Evil game all day. The characters, the music, the puzzles, the atmosphere. It's just a fantastic game, and the remake is fantastic too. Take note, developers. The Resident Evil remake, that's how you remake a fucking game. So, the director's cut and the remake, you can play either one. I recommend playing both at some point in your life. Both fantastic games. I think Resident Evil is at its best when it's about survival horror. Survival horror is about conserving your ammo. It's about running away from fights if you can. It's about knifing enemies if you can, shooting them in the head, watching your resources, conserving ammo, trying not to use all your health items because it might be a while before you find another one. To me, that's what survival horror is about. It's about trying to survive with limited resources and feeling like the game's against you. It's automatically stacked against you, and you have to overcome this obstacle. That's what survival horror means to me, and unfortunately, Capcom decided to take Resident Evil in a different direction. They want to make it about more action, making it look like a movie, dumping clips and clips into your enemies, just adrenaline pumping action left and right. And I'm not a fan of the newer Resident Evil games, but I will give Capcom props for one thing. Resident Evil Revelations. I played the first one and I enjoyed it. I haven't played the second one yet, so I don't have an opinion on it. Let's talk about Resident Evil 2. The most memorable things about Resident Evil 2 to me are Mr. X and William Birkin. Mr. X is one scary looking motherfucker. He wears a trench coat and he's very tall. And I remember the cutscene where he got into a fight with Ada. He was just walking towards her. As he was trying to kill her, he just looks badass in that cutscene. And I just want to say one thing about Ada. I know she's a popular character, and I understand why, but Ada is a thought. She put Leon through so much shit. Fuck her. Now, William Birkin is one of my favorite characters in the series, and one of my favorite cutscenes in Resident Evil 2 is when William Birkin is attacking Umbrella members, and you see these two Umbrella members. They're in this small area, they're trapped, and they try to kill Birkin, and Birkin just demolishes both of them. It's pretty scary thinking about it. You have this creature with this fucking huge arm with an eye, this huge eye that looks back at you, and he's chasing you in this small area, and all you have is this submachine gun. You're fucked. And another one of my favorite cutscenes is when this poor guy is stuck in a cell with William Birkin, and all you see is Birkin just tear this guy apart. It's fucked up. Now, the story of William Birkin and his family is sad, but it's also very interesting. I think Resident Evil 2 is a great game. Leon and Claire are awesome characters. Now, in the first 3 Resident Evil games, you had a combination of tank controls, static cameras, and pre-rendered backgrounds, and I think it worked very well. The pre-rendered backgrounds were very detailed, and I didn't mind the tank controls. I think it works in a survival horror game. And one thing about Capcom, what they used to do with the Resident Evil games, to me, they knew how to put the music in the right place. Whether you're going into different areas or during a cutscene, when something happens, they have this scary fucking music playing in the background right when something happens, and it just fits perfectly with what's going on. And some people might think I'm just stubborn and I can't accept change, but I like Code Veronica. Code Veronica did not have pre-rendered backgrounds, but it was a fantastic game because it was survival horror. It wasn't just another action game where you try to kill as many enemies as possible and it tries to look like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It was survival horror. And even though I'm saying a lot of great things about my favorite Resident Evil games, I don't think they're perfect. I do think at certain parts they give you too much ammo and healing items, and I'm specifically talking about Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, but those are minor issues. They're still fantastic horror games, and I also wanted to mention this. I also like how they had extra modes, like Mercenary mode in Resident Evil 3, that's one of my favorite modes, and the Fourth Survivor, and when you play as Hunk. And I remember you could play as Tofu too. Remember that fucking guy? That was hilarious. So there's a lot of little extra things that you could work towards when you're playing the older Resident Evil games that I enjoyed. I still love Resident Evil 3's Mercenary mode till this day. And speaking of that, let's talk about Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 3 is as close to perfect as you can get for a classic Resident Evil game, and that's because of the Nemesis. The Nemesis is one of my favorite characters of all time. The Nemesis is badass, and one of the things that makes him interesting is the fact that he chases you. That's right, at certain parts of the game, he will run after you, and if you try to move to another part of the level, he'll still chase you. I remember going as a kid and I tried to run away from him, and I went to a different part of the level, and I take a couple of steps forward and the music plays and he's right behind me running after me. Scared the fuck out of me when I was a kid, but it's great memories, and that's why Resident Evil 3 is one of my favorite games, because I think the Nemesis is a fantastic antagonist, and I just think it's perfect as you're playing as Jill, and this fucking creature with a rocket launcher is chasing you screaming, "Stars!" It is a memorable experience, and in Resident Evil 3, they brought back Jill Valentine. That was a good decision. Now, after Resident Evil Code Veronica and Resident Evil 0, Capcom decided to go in a new direction, and you see that with Resident Evil 4. I don't hate Resident Evil 4. I don't really think it's a bad game, I just don't see the hype behind it. I'm not the biggest fan of Resident Evil 4, and especially the games they came out with after that, Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6, I just think they dropped the ball with the series. I want Resident Evil to be survival horror, not an action game, no, I want survival horror. I don't know what's gonna happen with Resident Evil 7, I guess we'll find out. Now, I haven't said that much about Resident Evil 0 or Resident Evil Code Veronica X. It's been a while since I played Resident Evil 0, so I have to replay that at some point. And Code Veronica X, it's a fantastic game. You should definitely check it out. Code Veronica X, one of my favorite Resident Evil games. Some of my favorite parts are with Wesker. One part is when his eyes turn red and he starts fucking you up, and another part is a battle between him and someone else, and they just start going at it, and that fight is crazy. Wesker is badass, but he's a fucking Judas. Fuck him. Why does he have to be so cool? Play Code Veronica X if you haven't, especially if you're a fan of Resident Evil, the newer games, the older games. If you somehow missed Code Veronica X, play that fucking game. Thank you for watching this video. Tell me your favorite Resident Evil games, tell me your favorite memories, your characters, whatever. You know what to do. Have a great day.